Since 1924, from its home in Oak Park, the University of the Pacific's McGeorge School of Law has helped power the bar, the bench, and the legislative and regulatory communities. Recently, McGeorge has embarked on a new initiative to elevate its rankings and refocus how it delivers legal education. The new dean of the McGeorge School of Law, Michael Hunter Schwartz, joins us to talk about the state of McGeorge, the state of the law, and preparing the next generation of lawyers and judges. Next on Studio Sacramento.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Schwartz, 5 years ago, McGeorge reduced expenses by 40%. Recently, you made a 25% staff cut. What's driving these reductions?
Mostly it has to do with changes in the legal education and the lawyering landscape. So for many, many years, McGeorge was a law school that had between 1,100 and 1,200 students on our campus. And now we're more like 500 students. And so we had an extraordinarily low student-faculty ratio, about 6 or 7 to 1. And so we basically were faced with two choices to be a long-term sustainable law school. One was to greatly grow enrollment, which would have required us to lower our standards. And the other one was to reduce the size of our faculty and really focus on bringing in a high-quality student class and growing the reputation and the impact of McGeorge.
What's going on with that type of reduction in student population? Is that unique to McGeorge, or is that something across the legal education world?
Oh, that's a national thing. So in 2004, there were 100,000 applicants to law school. For the last 3 years, it's been more like 52,000.
Wow.
And so part of those things are driven by changes in the job market as lawyers embrace automation to be more efficient in delivering services to their clients. Some things are a product of tort reform, where there are less opportunities for lawyers throughout the country. And then some of it was that, at least in my opinion, the law schools in the United States overbuilt. We became too large for what the country needs in terms of lawyers.
What brought you to McGeorge? What attracted you to come here?
So I was dean at a law school in Arkansas, University of Arkansas, Little Rock, and I got a call from the editor-in-chief of the largest publisher of legal books in the United States, West Publishing. A very odd thing for him to make the call, and he basically said, you need to apply for the job at McGeorge. It's open, and it's the sanest faculty in the United States. And
the sanest faculty, well, after your tenure and getting to know your faculty here, what's the diagnosis? Are they?
I'm not really qualified to diagnose, but what I would say is they're certainly the sanest faculty I've ever worked with. And they're very passionate about the things that I'm passionate about: students being successful, getting great jobs, feeling great about their experience. And so in that sense, they really did live up to their sane hype.
What do you envision as the future of McGeorge, given these changes you described in the legal profession, and really where the needs are emerging across the country?
So McGeorge has a long history of being known for producing very highly skilled practitioners. That's really where we made our reputation, and that's really where I think we're doubling down in terms of our focus as a law school. Typically, maybe a third of all the law schools, maybe half, require students, for example, to actually see clients before they graduate. McGeorge actually is one of only 6 law schools now that requires 2 of those experiences.
Really?
Yes. And another example is most law schools have 2 or 3 semesters of legal writing. We have 4.
4 semesters. Yeah. Oh, gee, that must be really attractive to the students.
Well, I think when you talk to lawyers, I did a survey of 1,000 legal employers when I got to McGeorge in the fall, and one thing across the board that lawyers say is that writing skills are critical to success in practice. And so the students say, wow, that's what's going to get me a job, that's going to make me successful in the job.
Well, one of the things that's most interesting about your background is you not only are a student of the law, but also you're a student of how one learns the law. And your claim to fame is really around transforming how legal education is delivered. Tell us a little bit about how you got into that as such a passion.
Well, as all the good stories in my life start, it starts with my wife making fun of me. She has a PhD in educational psychology, and she came to see me teach. And she sat in the back of the room and scribbled notes furiously. And afterwards, she said something that sort of haunts me to this day. She said, you know, you taught a great class. She was very generous in her comments, but she said, you have no idea when it works, why it works, and when it fails, why it fails.
Interesting.
And what she was really doing was trying to get me to take a class that her community college was offering in learning theory and instructional design, because they weren't getting enough students for the class. They were looking for teaching professionals. And so I took the class. It backfired on my wife a little bit because a number of the students dropped the class because the law professor was too intense. But aside from that, it transformed my work. So since then, for the last 16 years or so, all I've been doing is researching and writing about how to improve legal education.
This is interesting because I grew up watching The Paper Chase and Professor Kingsfield. So tell us what traditions or styles of teaching that aspiring attorneys go through, which are part of tradition, but they really don't work anymore.
I love that question because it really captures part of what we need to be doing as law professors. So the traditional model of Socratic questioning in the classroom depicted in Paper Chase doesn't work for a huge percentage of our population. If you want to think about it, it was created for a very singular population in the 1880s at Harvard Law School. And law schools are so much different than that today. And so it doesn't actually make much sense. It's sort of like, would you want to fly in a plane that was designed in 1880 or drive a car that was designed in 1880, get medication from a doctor trained on 1880 methods? The same thing would be true for legal education, that there's so much more now that we know about how students learn that it's a shame for our students if we don't learn it.
Give me an example of how a way that law education is typically delivered, how it would be more effective using a different approach.
So the most common way is to basically spend the entire class asking students questions. I used to have the image of my law professors that when they went out to dinner with their wives and their wives would say, do you like what you have for dinner? They would say, well, tell me what you think about my dinner. The always answering every question with a question is the traditional method of legal education. And the students have to kind of figure it out. And I'd contrast that with a particular method called team-based learning, which I think is the single most exciting thing in all of higher education teaching. And the basic way it works is the students walk into class and they immediately take a 10-question multiple choice test on the key points of the reading for the night. Then they turn that in and then they take it again as a small group, and the small groups last for the whole semester. And so then the professor can grade, while they're working as a group, grade their individual answers and then find out how each of the groups answered each of the questions by just saying, hold up A, B, C, or D with your answer to the question. And so within a very short period of time, the professor can know, oh, these subjects everyone understood. I don't need to spend time teaching that. These subjects nobody understood. I really need to go into much more depth. And so it allows the professor to be much more targeted in her teaching, to really focus on the things that students are struggling with, and then it frees up class time to do more advanced analytical and practical kinds of exercises with the students.
That makes perfect sense to me, but I got to tell you, it almost sounds like the magician's misdirection, which is that you have them take the test, then you have them get together and redo it, and they're misdirected in working with each other, and they don't realize that repetition is the mother of skill, and that by the end of it, you know, by working together and collaborating, they end up with mastery of the subject.
Well, I'm completely delighted by your metaphor. That makes my day. That's actually my highlight of my day. I'll have to use it sometime when I'm presenting that teaching method, because that's exactly right, that what we know about human learning is that rehearsal is a huge part of learning. And the other part is that there's really good research that today's student population, which is incredibly more diverse than that Harvard population, actually learns better in small group settings. And so it actually, what it does is it turns every student into both a teacher and a student.
What are the students thirsting for today that maybe they weren't when you were going through law school? How has the population and what they're yearning for just transformed?
Well, that one, I think one of the things is they want to see the practical effect of what they're learning. When I was growing up, it was sort of, you learned everything you possibly could just in case it ever came up. And now there's so much information that there's no way to learn everything. And so you really have to teach your students to be experts on learning how to learn, because there's no hope that they can get it all. The typical summary of the law in the course I teach, contract law, is like 1,200 pages. There's no way to give that to the students. So you have to really, and they understand this as well, you have to really give them the skills about how to figure it out for themselves. And so teach them the skill of learning, and they'll be able to learn everything they need for the rest of their careers.
I want to come back to this new trajectory in elevating standards. Now, just a couple of fast facts. What's McGeorge's first time pass rate on the bar?
For the last several bars, we've been vacillating between 60 and 70%.
60 and 70%. How does that compare to the other national class schools in California, Cal, Stanford, UCLA, USC, Davis? How do you guys rank up with those folks?
So with Hastings, which is UC San Francisco, we're usually a little bit ahead of them. With the other schools, we're a little bit behind them. With the private schools like USF and Santa Clara, we're at Golden Gate, we're either ahead or about the same.
Why is raising the rankings, why is that so important to McGeorge?
I think it's because this is, if you sort of look at why students choose a law school, today's generation is so much more sophisticated than I was. I basically said, I want to stay in the Bay Area. That was my very sophisticated search process. Whereas I had a daughter who was really upset because she applied to 2 colleges. One was ranked 8th, one was ranked 13th, and she liked the 13th ranked school better, and she was terrified that it was going to ruin her life that she wanted to go to the 13th ranked school. And I of course know that's a meaningless distinction, but the reality of the market for students is that they take those rankings incredibly seriously.
So we've taught our kids to be too ingrained in the Yelp culture of 5-star reviews for just about everything.
Just about everything.
Just about everything. So in focusing, and the faculty focusing on upgrading the student population, what is it that McGeorge potentially leaves behind on the table of its legacy and traditions as it moves to this new future?
That's a great question. Actually, what we're going to be doing is returning to where we were about 5-7 years ago. So it's not actually that we're going to leave behind. We're going to really focus back on our legacy. We've had a bit of a decline in the last 5 years, and really this is a matter of moving the law school back to what it was always, and strengthening the law school. So for a long time, McGeorge was always ranked between about 90th and 110th among U.S. law schools, and we're not there right now. And so we're not so much leaving things behind as much as pursuing the excellence that McGeorge has always pursued.
And if you, from even when you were in Arkansas, looking at McGeorge as a peer and a competitor, what is it that McGeorge historically has been known for outside of Anthony Kennedy, that where people say, we need to go to Pacific McGeorge because they are X regarding this subject matter?
So certainly, I don't want to diminish how incredible it is for us to have the affiliation with Justice Kennedy. It's something that we're really proud of.
No, we're all proud of Justice Kennedy. I'll stipulate to that.
Oh, fabulous. Well, you've been around a lot of lawyers. We've been consistently ranked in the top 20 in the nation for international law. We are ranked 12th for moot court, and we're ranked 15th for mock trial. And our government law center is ranked 4th in the nation. And that really captures the 4 big areas. We have strengths also in environmental law. We have a faculty member the last 2 years in running has won 2 international honors for being the top environmental law professor in the country and in the world. And so we have a strength in environmental law as well, but those are basically the 5 areas that are the greatest strengths for McGeorge.
Do you think that McGeorge does a good job of telling its own story? As an example, you and I were talking earlier, and one of your predecessors, Elizabeth Parker, who was the former general counsel of the CIA, convened many years ago, before it was a popular subject, an international conference on cybersecurity, privacy, surveillance, all that sort of thing, that people refer to that for years later. Does McGeorge does a number of those things, water policy issues, prison reform. Are you guys any good at telling your own story?
I think it's a great question. I think we have room to grow in telling our story. This spring we had a conference on foreign interference in elections, which is really exciting and timely.
I didn't hear about that.
Yes, see, that's what I'm talking about. And so I do think there's more, we can do more to tell our story more effectively. I was looking at some research, and I discovered that out of the 204 law schools in the country, at 185 of them, someone uses a textbook authored by a McGeorge faculty members. Does anyone know that? No. So I think we have lots and lots of room to tell our story much more effectively, and I think that's part of my job.
So one of your claims to fame, talking about claims to fame, is you were ranked among the 15th most influential people in legal education by National Jurist magazine. What is going to be your impact, we'll say 5 years from now, in terms of what you're bringing to McGeorge and how it will be different in 5 years into the future?
Well, I certainly think that we will be a stronger law school when we get there. We will teach our students better so that when they get hired, employers are thrilled to employ them. It'll leave our graduates feeling like they got a great education. And so really, what I really am passionate about is quality instruction for our students. I also think we have some room to better serve our local community. And so I'm hoping part of my legacy will be that here we are sitting in Oak Park. We certainly have traditionally provided services to people in the community through our legal clinics, but I think there's so much more that we can do.
You guys recently got behind offering a scholarship of some sort to young people coming from Oak Park. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this was a scholarship. It was funded by generous donors that's exclusively for somebody who grew up in the Oak Park area and now wants to attend McGeorge. And I think that's one scholarship. It's a great start, but I think we still have a lot more to do in that community.
Oak Park is an interesting community in that McGeorge historically, for many years, was kind of seen as almost like the Vatican within Rome, as a separate city-state. But over the years, Pacific McGeorge has really made a lot of movement in integrating itself into the community. What do you think is important to keep leveraging about that relationship to the Oak Park community, and how it demonstrates McGeorge's commitment to serving across the spectrum in a diversity of ways?
So I think part of it is the core of our mission as a law school, and part of that core mission is public service and serving our community. It's the kind of lawyers that we want to graduate. So if we're not practicing what we're preaching to our students, we're not really doing our job as a law school. And so what I really see McGeorge as, I feel like it's like a professional obligation that we have to the community to identify needs. For example, for the last several years, we've held an immigration day on our campus. And we invite people from all over Sacramento who need immigration help. And we basically multiply ourselves by all of the students who volunteer to do it and all of our faculty who volunteer to do it. And we spend a day basically helping people with immigration challenges. That's a really good model for the kinds of things that we need to be doing. We also held a pro se day. The pro se.
Pro se? What's that?
Yeah, lawyers in their technical terms. Pro se is when you represent yourself in a lawsuit. And we basically had a day where faculty and students worked with people who are representing themselves to help them be more effective in bringing their lawsuits or their divorces to fruition.
One of the things that is kind of a quiet assumption in this region is that McGeorge is kind of like the Intel Inside for California state government in particular. whether it's the judiciary, the legislature, the policy-making centers, that McGeorge is pervasive. What is the special relationship between McGeorge and the state and local government in terms of how your education helps power the policy decisions that affect all of our lives, not just here in Sacramento, but across the state?
And I think that's partially the way where McGeorge alums naturally gravitated. So we were in the Capitol already, and our alumni became a part of the government. People always say you can't throw a rock in any of the state buildings without hitting a McGeorge alumnus. And so part of that was sort of the natural outgrowth of our location. But there's also efforts that we've made to create what's really a unique curriculum for people who want to do government law. There really isn't any other law school in the country that has a curriculum that's as focused on giving people the skills they need to be effective as prosecutors, public defenders, as government workers, or as lobbyists.
You guys actually throw a lot of your students into little clinics and kind of initiatives around doing things with different types of law. We a couple of years back had some law students and the person who was running the program from McGeorge who take one policy area and they work on a piece of legislation every year as part of a clinic. What things like that do you do to equip your students for the real world so that it's not all just the textbook?
So, as I mentioned, we have this requirement that all of our students do 2 clinics or externships. We also are one of a few law schools that have a mentoring program baked into our required curriculum. So every student gets a mentor who practices in an area where the students hope to practice. They do 6 hours of shadowing, 2 hours of networking. And so those things are sort of baked in. And that clinic that you made reference to is our legislative and policy clinic. And so our students draft about 3 or 4 new statutes every year. In total, now it's about 22 since we launched this clinic. 13 of them have been enacted by the legislature, 12 signed into law by the governor. He made one mistake.
But your students have a better record than many of our elected assembly members and senators.
Oh, that's a really good point. They've done very well for themselves, and there's about 3 that are pending right now with the legislature. And what's great about that clinic is that the students find subjects that they're passionate about, and they learn how you draft, how you work it through the legislature. Our professor brings them to meetings with legislators so they can really learn the whole process of getting law enacted.
And I know that you've spent the majority of your career in academia, but as you look out into the world in which the law that your students learn is practiced, and you look at the big national issues that are facing us right now, everything from immigration to surveillance to the rule of law between the separation of powers, what issues are you most personally consumed with?
Wow. The hard part for me is to pick from the things. I am very concerned about what's going on with our country and immigration. That
Why?
We went from being a country that encouraged people to come to being a country that at least currently is sending a message that you're not welcome. And that just really troubles me a lot and keeps me awake at night. I'm also really concerned about, I think we have a real struggle in our country still about issues of race, that beyond just the immigration, but all issues of race. As a country, we are still inflamed and struggle with talking about really hard issues relating to race relations.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because the law and the judiciary in particular has been the mediation and solution ground for, bringing broad-based kind of collective commitments to how it is that we reconcile differences between us. At the federal level, there are lots of judicial posts that are empty. Court calendars here in California are overloaded. What do you say, if you could wave a magic wand in terms of strengthening and improving our legal system in order to perform its necessary and historic function, what would it be?
I think we have a lot of room to think about ways that we can use technology to improve the delivery of justice in our country, and to use data to really evaluate how we're doing and to act accordingly when the data creates information that we need to act on. And so I think so far we've been sort of very ad hoc in how we run our judiciary and not very thoughtful and systematic about how we collect data, how we use that data to make changes, and how we find ways to use technology so that we can get cases through our legal system more efficiently.
And I think we'll leave it there. Much success to you, and much success to Pacific McGeorge. And that's our show. Thanks to our guest, and thanks you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org.